Great. Well, good morning and thanks for joining our webinar today on culture, strategy and people. And thank you to our hosts at Forecast for setting this up for us. My name is Jeremy Roche and I've spent my career so far growing and building technology companies around the world. But what I've always believed is that I was building teams rather than building companies. And those teams consisted of our employees, but also our customers, our partners, and our suppliers. Now, I get to spend my time now advising growing technology companies, and I recently agreed to become a non-executive director of Forecast. And there were two real driving reasons behind this. One was that I could see the true benefit of the Forecast approach to building a product that automates all that busy work, surfaces best practices, predicts outcomes, and guides projects to success. But most importantly, helps teams and team members to do their best work. The idea of technology doing what it does best, so humans can do what they do best. But also the team at Forecast that I could see empowered to make decisions and working collaboratively together to build great product that focused on making Forecast customers successful. The idea that culture drives everything that we do. And today we brought together an awesome panel to talk about how culture in their businesses makes it successful and how it helps with growth and how to build great teams, particularly in an agency environment. So to get us going, I'll ask my panel to introduce themselves. And so starting, and it might not come up in your screens in the same way it comes up on mine, but starting on my top left, I have Jason. Jason, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Knight, and I run the London office of a business called Lucky Beard. We're a global design and advisory company, and we help startups and incumbents figure out how to change.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. And to my top right, I have Sean.
Hey, everyone. So I'm Sean. I'm MD at Blend. We're an inbound marketing agency specializing in lead gen and web development. We're founded in 2010. We're based out in Reading. We've grown pretty well. We're now 38 people. I think we have a fairly good culture, but I'll find out from the panel whether that's true, I hope, later.
Great. And Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Linton and I run an agency called Freestyle. We're based just outside Leamington Spa in Warwickshire. We're a 35-man agency, woman agency, and we're a digital experience design agency where we help brands differentiate using brand experience UX and experience design to build products and services.
Awesome, thanks. And Liam?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Liam. I'm the Managing Director and co-founder at Digital Detox. We're a humanity-led digital product agency. We specialise in digital transformation, strategy, full-stack design and development using technology to solve problems facing people on the planet. We do all of this with our three-pillar approach. We are a people-first organisation, so we're putting the well-being of our team and their careers and their kind of aspirations first and foremost when making decisions. We're technology-focused. We believe that in a world where technology and humanity, can work in perfect balance and perfect harmony. And we're planet conscious as well. So we're fully aware of the impact of our company on the world around us and our products and services and look to lead by example and be the change we want to be. And hoping to become a B Corp later this year as well. So yeah, good morning, everybody, and I'm really pleased to be here.
That's interesting. Perhaps we go back to the B Corp later as well. That's an interesting one to bring in. Now, normally in setting these things up, we have to discuss what questions we might ask our panel, but we've clearly touched on something here because people, as they registered, were already asking questions. So what we've done is we've pulled together some of those questions to get us going. And if you are interested and want to add a question, there is a Q&A button on the webinar, so you can actually chat with us or add Q&A, and we'll try and pick some of those up if we've got time. But we split some of the questions that came in into some different sections. So the first one was really about building a great culture. So I'd like to ask the panel why you think building a strong culture is so important, particularly in the success of the agency, and how culture doesn't just mean happy people, it means different things in building the culture that you want to build. So can we talk about that to start with? Volunteer to go first? Come on then, Suzanne, you go first this time. Well, I didn't have a volunteer, did I? So
remind me the question again.
Let's talk about building a strong culture and why it's important, and what building a strong culture means to you.
I think from my point of view, it's around the values and the premise around the founders and around the people leading the business. Every company has its own culture, but it's very particular to the people in it and the people who run it. And it, to me, it has to be authentic, and it has to represent the people who are leading the organisation.
I think authentic's a good word there, isn't it? It's really, because you can't
potentially overused though.
Well, no, but in this, it's like you can't build something that is based on a false premise, can you? Because it doesn't last very long.
No, and we've been going for 25 years, and we've gone back and looked at our values from time to time, and it does come back to the same things every single time. You might tweak them slightly to demonstrate slightly different parts of it, but I think you still come back to the core elements that are true to you.
I think build on that a little bit as well. I think it's important because as businesses, the only thing that we have is the people that we surround ourselves with and that we're lucky enough to work with. And I think that the role of leaders in any business is creating the conditions for those people to be at their best as often as possible. And I think culture boiled down is as simple as that. And it is changing, it's dynamic. I think there's a lot that gets thrown at businesses over time, and to run a business for that amount of time and to keep it consistent is amazing. But it's moving and adapting so that you're enabling people to be their best, do their best, and feel fulfilled while they're doing it. I think sounds simple, it's not easy, but yeah, I think getting that right is key to getting a successful business.
I've got to agree with both of those things wholeheartedly. I mean, when we were in a culture vacuum, our culture hadn't really evolved. We found it so hard to employ people, and we're a people business. We put an ad out, we might get 1 or 2 people applying, and they weren't particularly good. Later, when our culture did evolve, we found it much easier to hire. In fact, people would break down our door to come and work here, and that's when we knew we had a decent culture. I think if you're a people business, which agencies are, then you have to have fantastic people doing the work. And of course, you don't want churn. So if you don't have a good culture, people tend to leave pretty quickly, and your customers hate churn. So you find that they churn as well. And so it becomes self-fulfilling cycle of doom. Or you're building a really good culture, which means that it just gets better and better in theory.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I think every company's got a culture to speak of. And if you don't put the effort in to build the culture that you want, which is effectively just an expression of your personality as a founder, and also to create a culture of the company that you want to work in as a founder, you don't put that time and effort in, and the culture, as Sean just said, can go the other way. And it can be counterproductive to the reasons why you started a company and what you want to achieve with that company. But yeah, it's all about the people, isn't it? Because you want to build a culture that allows people to prosper, to be successful, and also drive the company forward as well.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility, isn't it? Because if you don't like the culture and you were the founder, you kind of really been super responsible for that.
Yeah.
Then you have to leave.
One of the questions that we got was about what challenges you faced when creating and embedding that culture, and have there been situations where it didn't work for you?
I'll go. I think it's very hard to sort of manufacture a culture. It does evolve somewhat. I think one of the problems we had is when our culture was hijacked somewhat by certain parties who have their own agenda. And if it doesn't come from the top down and it gets cut off and there's bigger influence, not necessarily for the right reasons, then that can cause you real problems. And addressing that is very, very difficult. of course, because it happens almost in secret, and you turn around one day and you realize your culture's gone rotten, and you prided yourself on having no politics, and suddenly there's politics flying around left, right and center. And you go, what are we going to do about this? I just don't know. A monster is being created, and it's a rotten apple scenario. It does infect everything else. Getting that back in control has probably been one of the biggest lessons we've learned, actually, over the years.
I think that's the hardest, as you said, Sean, the hardest thing around is actually addressing it, but the relief when you actually do, and I think how quickly that culture can bounce back when you've got rid of the bad apples is quite encouraging when it happens. Certainly for us, it has been.
You get all sorts of people dragged into that sort of stuff, and then when the influencer is gone, you realise that they go, I didn't quite understand what the problem was all the time, and they realise that it's a bit of a relief as well. But you get all sorts of people joining in who you think better off, but it's complex. It's really, really complex. Sorry, I cut someone off there.
No, I think it is complex, and I think that one of the things that has been really interesting is once that culture is established, and I think it's creating a culture. So I think you build a culture. I think you establish a culture through the consistent behaviors of everyone in the business. Once that's established and ingrained in a bunch of people, it's interesting to see how, when something comes into that culture that doesn't fit, or is at odds with it, it gets pushed out, and people become quite fierce, protective of that culture as well. So that's one of the challenges, identifying early what those conflicts are, and then moving that out of the business so that that culture that exists can continue to thrive.
I've got to chip in one more bit, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Well, we found that some of the worst people were the best performers, actually. They were fantastic at their job. I mean, really, really good. And yet they were terrible for our business because they were disruptive. They were difficult for a variety of reasons, but it was so hard to identify because they were good at their job. So it's hard to say, see you later, because they were so good at their job. Well, I'll do my job. I do it really well. But we didn't have values at the time, or not articulated values. So we couldn't measure them against anything other than the work. And that was the problem. And that's why values, which sound a little bit, values, but actually they were so important. Once we established what they were, we could see that these people didn't live them. And when we started pointing that out, it was quite soon they left of their own accord because they didn't meet our values.
So they solved the problem for you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jason, carry on.
No, I was going to say that it's interesting because those people are the most dangerous. They're sort of a high-performing, high negative impact, because people around them look and go, well, they're doing a great job, and they're sort of in opposition to the culture. They're believable because of the job that they do, and they can have a really negative impact on culture. The people who are not that great at their job and bad for the culture, not a big threat, but those high-performing, bad for culture people are the ones that potentially disrupt things.
The other thing that can challenge your culture is if you're working with another organization, a client maybe, and they have a slightly different culture, and sometimes that can create some friction within the project. And it can come down to simple things like can your team work over the weekend, and you might get that on a kind of Friday or something, and obviously that's not something we ever really do, only in really kind of extreme circumstances. And if it's not an extreme circumstance, it's kind of an expectation that you will sometimes do that. I mean, we've been really lucky with all our clients. They're fantastic clients. We're very lucky to have them, but just on the odd occasion, sometimes those kind of things do crop up, and that requires a bit of effort just to manage that kind of situation. So we're very open about who we work with, and we're open to working with different companies in different places, different industries, and different cultures. But it does cause some friction if they're not aligned. But actually, we like to think that maybe we can impart some of our culture onto other organisations and also learn something from them. So I think it's a good. You can get that good tension as well, and you can both learn from it as well. But sometimes, when you're getting those overtime requests, it can be a little bit tricky to manage and maintain your culture and your values.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? In a people-based business, that culture does flow outside the organisation, and there is that overlap between the businesses that you're serving and also your partners that might be working with you, and how those cultures mesh together. So you can sometimes get some interesting challenges from that.
Yeah, for us, we're in partnership with our clients. We're all trying to achieve the same thing.
Yeah.
And we have had clients in the past where we've made the decision to part company because of a clash. It becomes not worth. We risk losing good people in our team and compromising their well-being by the strains that particular client's way of working puts on us. And you try and sort that out, and you work with the client to make that better. But if it actually becomes something that is destructive, then you have to make sort of a decision to move on.
Yeah, and that's sometimes a hard decision. I do remember once writing to a customer to tell them that we weren't going to work with them anymore, and it was a very difficult thing to write because you don't want to sack your customers. But actually, the customer came back and hadn't realised that they had a toxic problem, and the problem that we were dealing with wasn't actually a corporate culture; it was a team culture, and they fixed that and became a super long-term customer. So if we hadn't called it out, we'd never have had the conversation, and we wouldn't have built a great relationship going forward. So now, you're all founders or co-founders, and one of the questions that came in was about what happens when you start an agency. How soon do you feel like you've got a culture, and when does that start? Come on, somebody's got to go with that one. Start with.
I think it starts from day one. I think it's like, again, I think the culture is an extension of your own personality as a founder. Because when you start a company, obviously you've taken a leap of faith, you want to go it alone, but you also want to make sure that you need to make sure you enjoy it and you love what you do, and therefore the culture has to be enjoyable. Founder, so it is an expression of the company that you want to work in. I know from my personal experience that I've worked in companies before, I had no control over the culture, and sometimes I didn't enjoy it. And then at Digital D, I have lots of control over the culture, and trying to make it as enjoyable for myself and for everybody who joins. So I think you can start working on it from day one, and you can build it however you want, but you build it for the company you want to work in, and build it for the objectives of the company as well.
I'd be a bit controversial and half disagree with Liam.
Go on then.
Well, I think when you're starting a business, you're you, right? And so I don't know if that's culture, because you just go, you go to the pub after work and so on, but that's what you do. It's when you've got other people who start living, acting in the way that you act, and repeating it to new people who come in and so on. Then you suddenly start realizing that, there is a culture here that's being created because it's being lived by other people and it's being promoted and propagated by other people. Yeah. And that's when I sort of realized that, in the recruitment side of things, that we actually had a culture. It existed beyond me and Phil, who I started the business with. When it was just us, we kind of just were. When other people were, acting in the way that pleased us, I suppose, that reflected the way that we like to be, then I felt that we'd actually finally developed a culture.
Interesting. Jason, Suzanne?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a point in both of those. I think I really agree that a culture is an extension of the individual values and behaviors of the leaders that start that business. And it continues, and then you I think spot on, Sean, that gets then reflected back, and in that mirror and in that feedback, if it's positive, then you reaffirm it, and it kind of grows and builds into something that spreads, which is amazing. I did an interesting, also maybe slightly different, journey into this, and joining a business that had been established, by three guys, a really strong sense of culture, which was based on, their beliefs, their way of doing things, their ambitions, their sort of the vision of the future. Now, coming into that was, obviously a strong culture, but the business grew into different markets and different people, and so that's evolved. It's still, core to those founding sort of beliefs and principles, but it changes, and it's there's nuance to it, and so it's a living, breathing thing, but it's a product of the people and their values. I think respect that they treat each other with, the integrity that they operate with, the passion, the ambition, the sort of creativity, the open-mindedness, all those things are then picked up by people and reflected.
I think where I challenge, where I get challenged myself is you create a business, as Liam said, around the business you want to work in, and over a number of years, you have to keep questioning yourself about whether you're right, about whether that's the right direction to take it in, or the right principles to uphold. And I think as you bring other people into the companies, that they should absolutely challenge that thinking, those beliefs. So I'm thinking around, hierarchical structures versus a more sort of autonomous structure, how we work as a team together, how we, agile organizational structure, loads and loads of different elements of that. And as you're experimenting with different ways of working, people do come to the party with a whole lot of challenges to that. And for me as a founder, I find that both invigorating, but also quite challenging to work out is it just a dream of mine, or can I actually articulate it well enough to be able to drive that through as a principle that we continue to do, and then in that continual tweaking, does it lose the magic that you'd first envisaged or dreamt?
It's interesting, that original magic, and there does come a time in a size where, in fact, the team have to start taking responsibility for the culture as well, because it can't all revolve around the founder.
Mm-hmm. I did a couple of years back. We were advised or I was advised to find somebody else to help around culture and people, and we recruited somebody into that role who's far better at it than I am. She's an embodiment of all the great things in the culture, and she's better at it than I am. So I feel quite redundant now.
Yeah,
that's nice. That's fun.
It feels a bit weird though.
Yeah, true. Go on, John.
We did the same. So we took on a director of people, and I thought at the time, well, is this the right move? I mean, surely we can do this. We've been doing it for years, but actually he's probably the busiest person in our company, and it's made a massive, massive difference to have someone else, looking after our most valuable asset, which is our people. So yeah, that's been a really, really good move. He should be really talking here right now, not me. But
yeah, I think what Suzanne said, we also have Marissa, who heads up our people and looks after our team and makes sure everybody's okay and like you say, does an amazing job. So I think whilst you might set up that culture, it is important to bring people on board who have different points of view. You can then challenge you and then get on with it. So you don't want the culture to be reliant on you as a founder or a co-founder. You build that culture and have other people kind of be your cultural leaders, if you like, and then bring in new ideas and bring in new people into it. And that's the most satisfying thing I think about a culture, is it takes a life of its own. People are running with it, they're coming up with new ideas, and they're building it up and up and up. And so you just kind of sort of sit back and say, okay, this is working out really well now.
It enriches it, doesn't it? Those other people's views and approaches.
So here's a live question from our audience. Follow on from that. Can we give some advice on cultivating and creating culture for a company that's 100% remote, with a team spread with a team? So this is a good one. This is a good one. And thanks for the question. So a team that's 100% remote and spread across the globe, so no opportunity for gatherings, and a team that feels like it's siloed. What advice could we give?
Wow,
I think where you have that team, when you've actually come together and that's the deal, I think you can absolutely build a structure and a culture around that, because that's the deal. I think where it falls apart is when the original deal was you're all in the office together. I know there are several agencies that have done that very successfully, but they do put a whole load of effort into making it feel like it's one team. And I know that some of them who have been completely remote have ended up having hubs in major cities to ask people to come together, when certainly for the global. But I think it's a massive challenge.
Yeah, I certainly did. I had a team that was spread all over the US, and we ended up with a whole load of WeWork subscriptions so that people could choose to come together when they wanted to hang out with each other. And I think the current COVID situations obviously will obviously interfere with that sort of approach, but giving people the opportunity to be together. And then I think also you've got the tools and how you use the tools in the business to keep people connected, whatever it is you choose. Because you've got to create that connection virtually, haven't you?
Yeah, I think the other part of that is, what an office gave us was interactions outside of work. And even if that was a fleeting interaction, I think it was the relationship we built with people was outside of the focus on the piece of work that you were doing. And that's what, built value, it built trust, it built respect, all those good things. And it built understanding and empathy for each other. So looking to find ways to do that and connect outside of the daily work, even if it's in little pockets and on a personal level, I think is really important, because that builds the connection and maybe sort of, creates a little bit more of that culture.
And you're across multiple locations, aren't you, Jason?
Yeah, we are. And I think, on one hand, this has been an amazing learning experience for us, because as a global organization, we've become a lot closer operationally, culturally, and a lot more alignment and a lot more efficiency around how we do things, understanding the different parts of the business. So that's been amazing. But the challenge of the interpersonal in a remote world is real. So trying to find those opportunities to connect with people and to understand the situation that they're going through. I think your point is a really good one on kind of choice and option, finding ways for people to engage as and when they can, when they need to, whether it be in an office or wherever. But I think one of the downsides of this and remote working has been the concentration, the intensity of work at the expense of a lot of other things. Yeah. And so finding or sort of manufacturing time to break away from that is critical for the creation or maintenance of a culture in a business.
I find it quite hard to give advice there, because we're one office, although we have, someone working in Ukraine, someone working in the States, we're here. The only thing that we found really helped maintain some form of culture was when everyone was working from home, was having regular cadence of activities, company updates, make sure that they happen every week on the dot, so it becomes part of the routine, because that's a great way of bringing people together as well. Some more light-hearted stuff, having a social committee and so on. Yeah. Because even when people were remote, if they're doing poker nights, they could do it remote. If they're catching up and doing some cooking, competitions and so on. So it's interesting how people connect on different levels at different times. And I can imagine if your entire team is remote and geographically spread, that you'd have to find some techniques to bring people together in a regular way.
I think you also mentioned silos. Did you?
Yes. Yeah. There was a follow up to the question.
We've lost Jeremy.
Question said. Oh, have you lost me? Am I back?
You're back.
Great. So yes, you're absolutely right, Suzanne. The question also finished with, we also work in rather siloed teams.
So from what we've done in the past is sort of try to set up coffee. We have a random coffeeizer system where you sort of given a 10 minutes coffee break with somebody that the randomizer selects for you. So we're trying to make sure that's across different. So you're not, you end up with a project team or a discipline team who can be quite close, but there are an awful lot of people within the organisation who might never talk to each other over weeks or months. And so it's trying to make sure that sort of randomised socialising does happen. That's not necessarily driven by the person having to do it themselves.
And you could do that remotely as well, couldn't you?
Oh yeah, it's remote. Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
I mean, sorry, Jack. No, we've been obviously working remote for over a year now, and the team's done amazingly well. I'm so proud of what we've been able to achieve the last year, and just team kind of just went into it straight away and really adapted really well. But that's because we had a we had an office in Brixton and we had that culture before. I think if it was a totally remote culture from day one, then you do need to have those kind of a little bit more structure around the teams, a little bit more structure around maybe buddy systems, a little bit more structure about different teams connecting over coffee to share experiences. Because one of the things we've really found last year is if you're not in the office and you're not able to just tap someone on the shoulder and ask somebody a question, it could be like, what's the best place for lunch? Or it could be, can you do code is not working? If you don't have that, people feel a little bit less inclined to fire up a VC and talk to somebody. So it's putting a bit more structure in place. And also I think it might be a little bit more around the org chart as well, so people know exactly who they can talk to at any given time, and there's some structure in place. And the last thing I was going to say is just around process as well. So as well as having a relatively flat org structure, we've always kind of, given people a bit more autonomy to run things and do things in the best way that they see fit based on feedback they get from other people. So go speak to this person, go speak to that person. But actually, if you're working remote, you do need a bit more of a process. You do need a bit more of a how-to guide for lots of parts of the business. So people can just work independently a lot more. If I was doing it, but I don't have any experience in it, but if I was doing it completely remote, that's probably how I would approach it.
You mentioned, but between you there, you mentioned it was the coffeeizer, Suzanne, was that and Sean, you mentioned sharing cooking and stuff like that. So fun and successful initiatives for helping build and maintain culture. Can you build on those a little bit? I'm fascinated by cooking.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, just to go into it then. Someone comes up with a recipe. They share it with everyone who's on board with that. We go home, we set up our Zoom, we start cooking it while conversing and so on, and then we display the results via Slack. And then everyone votes on who wins, and the winner picks the next recipe, and we do that a month later. So we've done all sorts of things from burritos, pizza, pasta dishes, you name it. We've done it. The pizza one was the best because you had to make the dough. Well, you weren't meant to. You meant to do it before, but anyway, some people started making the dough while on the call, and that was basically trying to make pizza out of porridge. However, it did lead to quite a lot of fun. We also do the coffee bingo thing as well, where random people get hooked up, and you talk to people who you don't normally speak to from one month to the next, and you ask a series of, because we have a list of questions, that go-to questions to talk about other things other than work, which is really revealing actually. So that's been fantastic as well. But cooking, I'd recommend it to anyone.
Sounds like fun. You see, that'd be a good way to break down silos, messing the cooking, or certainly from my cooking perspective anyway.
Well, you get to see people's kitchens, and that's an eye-opener.
Anyone else want to build on that one?
Yeah, I think all these things that we're talking about. I think the cooking one, and really certain these things as well. I think what they do is they allow you to just understand people that you're working with a little bit differently and connect with them on a human level. And I think when there's that sort of connection, it builds trust and it builds an understanding of what their life is like, and then you understand them a little bit better, bring people closer, and ultimately that, I think, for a culture is key. I think one of the things that you mentioned, Sean, was those who are up for it. I think there's a big difference between creating opportunity for people to come together where they feel like they want to. This is mandating it. I think that sometimes it becomes tricky when it's forced and not everybody wants to. But if you've got a culture where everyone is looking forward to those sorts of things, and engaged in them, that's amazing. But finding that balance is going to be key, because sometimes you can over egg it.
Yeah,
people stuck on Zoom calls all day, and then they don't want to do those sorts of things. But, that balance and feeling, the touch on culture is key, and finding those nuances is very important.
Yeah, I think that's really, really a really good point. Not everyone wants to do stuff with their work colleagues necessarily, and people are very, very different. So Jake, who's our director of people, brought in a social committee, and that's not made up of, the leadership team. That is certain people throughout the business, and their job is to come up with social activities that are fairly broad. So we have, an element of geek within the business, because we do a lot of development work, some design work. They like doing things like Dungeons and Dragons, quizzes, gaming, to name but a few, escape rooms and so on. So the social committees sort things out like that. Personally, I like to ski, right? or play golf or badminton or whatever.
It's a bit hard on a Zoom call.
Bit hard on a Zoom. Well, Oculus.
Oh yeah.
You can play table tennis virtually these days. But yeah, no, that virtually, yes, absolutely. But it is a blip. COVID is a blip in time. As far as the business goes, we're going to be getting back to face. We've just got to, we've got to arrange things that will suit people, in the long term as well, rather than just trying to build everything virtual. I'm really keen to get people back to the office, to be honest. I think it's so important.
So I've got another live question in, and it follows on very neatly from you. A couple of you used the term trust when you were talking then. It's a question from Justin, who said, I read recently that creating an environment of safety is essential to positive culture. How do you go about intentionally promoting a workplace that cultivates safety and perhaps even some vulnerability in order to create authenticity and positive culture?
As I was just talking, I might as well carry on. I think one great way of doing it is to focus on issues rather than people. Because if you always focus on the issues, it never becomes personal, it never becomes an attack. And it means you're all trying to do the right thing by finding what the solution is. That builds quite a lot of trust.
Yeah.
Emma, who's our head of people, is in the middle of doing a coaching course, and it's quite an intensive thing she's going through. But seeing the difference in her very, very quickly in how she approaches situations, but also how she talks to people, how she deals with situations herself, is really educating the rest of us as to how we can be more open, but we can, be open and kind, because the intent in the end is for us all to be better. And that vulnerability, I think, has to come from the leadership team. You have to show that you're prepared, you're willing to be wrong. Yeah. You are wrong at times. That's the whole point, isn't it? You're not always right. So I think that from our point of view, I'm very keen that we get more of that coaching mentality throughout the rest of the business, and the skills. I think the skills and the understanding of what it entails is quite important to infuse through the rest of the team.
I think what you said there really resonates, Suzanne, around intent. I think that if you create a culture where you foster the sense that we're figuring this out, that there are going to be mistakes, that that nobody has all of the answers, but together we can figure out more interesting ways of doing things. It opens up to be vulnerable, or to maybe explore more, versus a culture that expects results and answers and sort of accountability to people that maybe aren't going to deliver. So I think that piece goes a long way in welcoming some of that vulnerability and saying, it is a safe space, because we're all in this figuring it out as we go along, and as the business changes, as our clients change, as the environment changes, that's what we do, and create a space where people feel that they can do that well together and be vulnerable doing so, feel safe doing it.
Yeah, I was just going to add, stuff goes wrong. It does. It's never a perfect project, never a perfect day. There's always challenges at work in the company and projects and stuff. And as soon as you kind of open yourself up to that and think, okay, well, we're not going to get it right every single time. The other side of it is when something goes wrong, you learn far more feedback than you do if something goes right. So whilst it might be initially, if you can learn from that experience and then take it forward and maybe tweak the process or improve it or enhance it or whatever you want to do, then that's a really good learning. And again, that has to come, like Suzanne said, that has to come from the leadership team. So, I'm quite open when I make mistakes. I tell everybody, I should have done this, I should have done that, but trying to learn from it. And therefore, when the team, and everybody's on the same side in the company, everyone's like on board and pushing for the right reasons. And things do go wrong, but it's about, okay, well, let's just sit down, figure it out. What did we learn? How do we push it forward? And I think if you can be a little bit more open to those kind of things and supportive, then it does build a little bit more trust, and then people will be willing to take a few more risks and take a little more autonomy, because they know if it does go wrong, that they're not going to get blamed for it.
I think just one thing to build on that is that there's a balance. I think that encouraging or allowing mistakes and that vulnerability is really fundamental.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not making the same mistake twice is critical for success. So yes, we're all figuring this out. Yes, we can make mistakes, but if we make the same mistakes twice, then there's a problem, because then we're not learning, because then it's somebody being lax about something, whatever it is. So maintaining that high standard and benchmark of expectation around people while creating the sort of exploration of vulnerability is again a sort of a balancing act.
Yeah, one day my first go as a CEO, I made a couple of mistakes and followed on with that with a rule which was Jeremy's not always right. And it was a hard learning exercise. When we get a chance for a beer, I'll regale you with that one. But so we've got a question in on how to tackle burnout relating to stress and negative impact, which goes nicely with one of the questions we had before on how do you balance client requirements against the team. So we talk about how we balance customers and how we work with stress that creates, maybe.
You need great project managers.
There you go. Good start.
I think customers are pretty tricky, aren't they? And it's very, very difficult to protect your team from the worst excesses of some of your clients. And when that's allowed to come through the team, it can lead to some pretty unhappy people who do get stressed and burned out. And we wrestle with it for a long time, because we have a number of account managers. They all deal with a number of different accounts. Some are more experienced than others at being able to push back quite firmly on clients asking for stuff that really they shouldn't be asking for, or expecting more than they're paying for, which leads to over-servicing and so on. And of course, when account managers try and do an awful lot for the client, what happens is the team suffers, because they've got to then work overtime to get it done and to live their promises. And what we found was a great stress reliever for everyone was to employ a traffic manager, because that gave a degree of separation between delivery teams and our customers, and allowed our account managers to maintain really good relationships with their customers, because they could say, I'm not sure if we can do that, I need to check with someone else, and it wasn't their fault if they couldn't do it. And the customers would have to realize that, yes, we have processes. It just made us grow up a little bit, and the teams have been a lot happier since. We use Office 5 to measure that, and so I can tell you that they are. It's a fact.
So traffic manager, we've talked about people, focus on people management. Those are good guiding points. Does anyone want to add to that one?
I also just think encouraging people to be able to communicate how they're feeling and what they're going through. That these sorts of things aren't the things that people need to deal with on their own, and they need to raise their hand and create an opportunity for them to do that. I think it's really interesting watching what's happening in the Olympics and the American gymnastics team. And how the different points of view on that, and performance, and in mental health and burnout, and all of these different areas. Yeah. But you've got to be, people got to be able to raise their hand. They've got to be able to verbalize these things, and then you've got to be able to manage that as leaders of the business. Be empathetic to it, because it's real, and we're in a situation where these sorts of things affect us, and they affect people acutely.
And stress doesn't always come from customers. It can come from people's personal circumstances. I mean, and helping people to deal with that, I think, is an important part of team building.
And understanding that, because the people that you have around you in the business are people that you want around you in the business for a long time. And it's about the long-term game, and figuring out how you work with those people to ensure that they're consistently fulfilled and happy and not burnt out, in order that you can continue that relationship that they are. It doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve anybody well.
I think going back to the Olympics or just sport in general, if you're in a high performance scenario, then you train for the peak. You don't expect to maintain. You don't do your PB every single day. So, and I think we have to learn to live with those peaks and troughs of performance, and that we bring our best game when it makes the most difference, and that the team is able to flex around the different parts of the team to compensate when people are going to have rough days. And it's being allowed to have that. It's that openness and vulnerability stuff again, isn't it? About how do we move as a one body to produce the best results, whilst everybody's not going to be on their A game all the time.
Yeah, I think the process for dealing with it is potentially 90% prevention rather than 10% about what you put in place as a company to give people a safe space to put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm not okay. And everybody's got a different way of relieving stress, be it, exercise, walking, computer game. I don't know, everybody's got different, and during any working day, anybody's got the opportunity to just, go off, take a break, and we can be very flexible and very supportive of that. Office Vibe is great for checking in with people, but also just asking people on a regular basis how you're doing, a couple of times to really dig down and see whether there's any kind of underlying concern or issues. And then if it does get to the point where burnout happens, which happened to us once this year with somebody really important to us as a company, it's just a case of we just need to take that person out of that situation, give them some space, give them the support they need, and I say deal with the consequences, but it's only a job. Do you know what I mean? There's other things more important. I think as long as everybody in your company understands that, then that will also help maybe reduce some of the pressure. And we're always quite willing to step in and support and take people out of situations if so be it. But hopefully it doesn't get to that point because you've done everything in advance to avoid it.
I think at the moment, what's interesting at the moment is around people taking holidays. And we've had so long where people there's been nowhere to go and have holiday apart from where Jeremy lives. So people haven't been taking breaks. And if they have been taking breaks, it's in the same four walls they've been living in for the last 18 months.
Yeah, so they haven't had that change of scenery and culture and environment that gives people a real break.
Well, yeah, and just a switch off that doesn't go, I'll just go and do something in the house. Or,
I'll go and answer an email.
Yeah. But so I think just actually not forcing people to take holiday, but recognizing how important that actually is, and making sure people are taking breaks, and just being on top of that side of how you manage the team.
Has been a bit Groundhog Day, but I think that you've also got to build an element of resilience into your team as well. Coping with stress when life can be stressful. I mean, that's just a fact of life. We can't avoid it necessarily. Yeah. Sometimes we have to actually build in some resilience, and whether that be via training, management training, support, regular appraisals, one-to-ones, and so on. But also, let people know that it's okay to sometimes feel a little bit under pressure and stressed, because actually, if you can't deal with that, then you're going to find life a bit more difficult in the long run, because there will always be stressful situations that come along, whether it be in your personal life, whether it be at work. Resilience is a really important factor here.
And a question came in whilst we were talking then about people feeling part of the team. And the question really their employees feel part of the team with the customer more than with the team. And the same people respond to the questions on the social type events, so the cooking or the coffees, or the same people always respond to that and others don't. How can you encourage the entire team to be part of it?
You broke up a little bit at the beginning of that question. Just didn't get the.
So the question was about another remote team where the team members often feel more aligned with the customer than the company, and the same people attend the same social events, and the same people don't attend. So how can you encourage the whole team to feel part of one? Does that make sense?
I think because some of that comes down to what Sean said about having different events for different people, isn't it? If you've got to
find something to make them engage.
Yeah.
Or encourage people to engage, not
and
make.
whether you can mandate the whole company actually, whilst being remote, does turn up to everything, turn up to even one thing. I don't know. I mean, we mandate a company meeting, but that's not the social side of it. I mean, there's certain social things that our guys do that I wouldn't want to go to, but that's fine.
But I think that comes back to it, doesn't it? If you've got to find a variety of things to give everyone a chance to be part of something. Like Sean, you mentioned cooking and you mentioned poker, and I'm sure everyone that likes cooking doesn't like poker.
Absolutely. Some of us go off and play badminton together, and we, and we're at very different. They're great levelers, right? The stuff you do outside of work are great levelers, because it doesn't matter whether you're the boss, whether you've just started last week. If you're going out and you're on a badminton court playing each other, then it's a great leveler. And I think that's important, because you get to meet people, in different ways, which allows you to connect in completely different ways as well. I don't think you can force people to do things socially for a company, and it would be foolish to do so. I think you just got to try and find enough variety of stuff so that it makes it more accessible to a wider volume of people. Some people will never join in. You can't make people happy. That's up to them. Some people are genuinely happy. Some people tend to go through life being a bit more miserable. That's down to them. You can only create an environment where maybe they would be slightly happier potentially, but you can't control people outside of work.
No. I think that you do, in instances of working in agencies where you have social committees, or the people that are responsible for that, and those are more often than not the people that are more likely to go and do that stuff, and so it's easier, right? So I think potentially finding some of those people who are the ones that aren't there, and giving them the responsibility to pull something together and bringing them in and kind of making them feel a part of it could be one way to do it, because it might encourage something totally different, to come out of that. It also makes, it gives them a sense of responsibility, so they're not looking at it from the outside, but, feel like they're part of creating that culture.
You might find, Jason, though, that that's a wasted effort, right? Because it's a bit like, do you put most of your effort into your lowest performer to try and make them a high performer, or do you put most of your effort into the highest performer to make them even better? You can't make people socially active necessarily, but what you can do is encourage those who are already socially active to get the most out of it. Yeah. Some people just won't come to the party. It's just, and accepting that is half the battle, really.
I think as long as those people don't get left behind or feel excluded as a result, because sometimes there are cultures that exist or created within businesses, and you don't want to create those sort of pockets of it. So it's
cliques are bad.
Yeah,
cliques are bad for sure.
Yeah, and some people don't do it, but when they do it, then they go, "Oh, geez, this is actually fun." But I couldn't be asked, or I haven't done it in the past, and sometimes being in it, you realize, oh, actually, this is far better. So
I think the thing with being remote now is we've all got used to habits. It's much more effort to go into the office, because I've not got to think about what to do for lunch. Whereas if I'm at home, you just get set into your own ways, don't you? Your habits. So this is about breaking some of those.
But I think you've all mentioned it through time. The other thing here is things evolve and change, and you've got to keep working it all the time, because otherwise you become stale and static. Now then, we've got about 5 minutes to run.
The internet's rubbish in Cornwall.
It is, isn't it?
I do have access to them. I've just opened up the questions. And if Jeremy's not coming back, I might just read it. Okay. So anonymous attendee has asked, what is your experience onboarding new members of staff into your current working environment, and how does the onboarding experience impact people's first impression of the company culture? Who wants to start on onboarding?
Go for it.
Okay, Emma's brought in she's got a whole lot of people involved in the company, and she's put together a values booklet. She's put together a little pack that she sends out with, it's not just got the staff handbook in it, but it's got a mug with someone's name on it and the Freestyle logo. So it's all individual, and so the person gets all this before they join. as well with all their tech, so they get their laptop and everything. And we've had really great responses to that onboarding process right at the beginning, right before someone actually starts. So Emma came from a recruitment background anyway, so she's quite in tune with that pre-joining feeling of making sure someone's actually on, excited about joining, and then feels completely and utterly part of the team. And in some ways, I actually think that the new people who've joined us probably feel more part of the team than I do at times.
Art Deco, all of that, we do a lot of that. Welcome packs, all of their kit, making sure people have everything on day one is really important. We also use a Trello board so that they have a number of things they can run through on their own in order to do some training. This is how you access X, Y, and Z. These are the people you need to reach out to, book some time in their meeting. And of course, you can have all of that, and they can work through it under their own steam, especially when they're remote. So they can start integrating themselves with the team, but have a real program of activity that they can self-serve to a certain extent as well. And also, even before they start, the whole process from the recruitment process through to what happens after they've accepted a role, and the communication with them at that point can all help with their introduction to the culture and give them a really good start with the company. We've got better and better at doing that, I think, and it makes a massive difference.
You all did great there, carrying on when I disappeared. So I'm going to ask my last question if I can. So we've got about 3 minutes to run, so you've got a little answer each. What advice would you give to anyone founding an agency and looking to build a strong culture? And you're all founders or co-founders, so what advice would you give to somebody else that wanted to do that?
I think there's a gentleman called Peter Chapp, who runs an accountant agency that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. But he once said to me, like, imagine if you can't retire, if you're going to be working in your company, for the foreseeable future. Just think about the kind of company that you want to work in, and make it as kind of enjoyable and matches up to your ambitions as a founder as possible. And then once you've done that, you then need to think about, building succession, autonomy, all those kind of things as well on the back of that. So yeah, that was something that struck with me. If I couldn't retire, if I was never going to retire, if I was going to work in a company, well, what kind of company would I want to work on for working for the foreseeable future?
Mine's sort of connected to that, which is around, I've got 3 kids, and I want to create a culture within the business that I'd be very happy that my kids got involved in. Not that they're going to take over the company, but to have the type of culture that I would hope other companies would follow, and be the type of place that they would want to be in, but they're not joining.
Yeah, good answer. Yeah.
And Sean's got a dog.
I was going to say, get an office dog, bring it into work. Hello.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I like coming to work, and I want everyone who comes to work to like coming to work as well, because it just you spend a lot of time at the office, and I can't imagine being miserable at the office. So surround yourself with really good people, often people who are better at doing what they do than you can do. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Make sure that your company vision is really clear so you can communicate it properly, and try and have fun while you do it, because otherwise, what's the point?
Perfect.
Yeah, I think it's quite simple. I think you've got to find something that lights you up, and your eyes light up when you talk about it. So that vision piece. I think you surround yourself with people who are better than you. You create a company of giants that way. And then the last piece is take it a day at a time. Focus on what you can do today, what you want to achieve today. And you do that, I think the rest starts to slowly take care of itself.
Perfect. Well, look, I'd like to thank you all a huge amount for doing that. It's been really enjoyable, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again and build on it one day.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much to our audience for joining us. If you've got questions, feel free to put them in the box, and we'll try and follow them up. And everyone, have a great rest of your day.